Hello. Today I want to share my vocation story with you. I am Sister Isabel Fierro, in Spanish, Isabel Fierro, daughter of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul. I come from the southern area of New Mexico, from Las Cruces, a small town outside of Las Cruces called Tortugas, famous for our love for Our Lady of Guadalupe and the celebration that occurs in December for 3 days. I was born to parents who were Hispanics, a mother who was an immigrant at a very young age. She crossed over the southern border from Mexico at the age of 7 with her family and 5 brothers and sisters. They settled near the area where I was born, and that's where she met my father, who is first generation Hispanic, born in New Mexico. I'm the oldest of 6 children, 3 boys, 3 girls, and there were 3 of us who were older, 3 who were younger. Our parents were very religious. My father at one time had wanted to be a priest, but because he had little education, it was not a possibility. But he was a man who educated himself, who knew the Bible, who shared it with us, who was really our first religious education teacher. My mother was also very religious, so they shared this in common. And so I grew up with a deep faith, great love for Our Lady of Guadalupe, and learning everything that I could. Of course, we always went to church, and this was something that was a happy occasion for me. And I learned to appreciate the Mass greatly and to appreciate the Blessed Sacrament. My father was a farmer, and so we didn't know that we were really poor, but when I look back, we were poor. We had everything that we needed. We had a deep faith, and we had our parents' love. And this was very meaningful and very important for me in my life. I went to public school all my life. Did not know any sisters except a group who had an orphanage near the area where we lived. And we went there for their festivals, for different occasions, and we helped them whenever we could. But I really didn't know them well. When I was almost a senior in high school, I began thinking what I would be. For a while back, I had felt this call from God, but kept telling myself, I don't know any sisters, so what am I going to do? Near the end of my high school, we had a first aid course, and I was introduced to the hospital. We learned about nursing. I saw the nurses, I observed, I knew what they did. And this seemed to be my calling also. So in a very simple discernment, after considering that I really didn't know sisters, I made the choice of becoming a nurse, little knowing that I could be both. And so I applied to enter the School of Nursing in El Paso, Texas, which was about 50 miles from where I was born and where I was raised, and took the entrance exam. When they told us to wait and the director would give us our results, I was very surprised to see this sister sitting behind a desk like I am right now, and with this cornet, this white hat, this blue dress, this blue habit, and I thought she was from another world. I went home and I was very excited, and I told my parents, first of all, I passed the exam. I can enter in August. And then I met this most otherworldly woman. I don't know so much about her, and I wish I had had time to talk with her. But she was very interesting. And she's a nurse, and she's a director of the School of Nursing. So my mother thought it was interesting. My father shook his head like, oh, so this has touched you. Something is going to happen. So I came and I entered the school. And in every unit of the hospital, in every service of the hospital, we had a sister. So this was my way of observing what the sisters did and learning how they related, how they connected with people, how they spoke about God, how they prayed with the people. And I also had the opportunity to go to Mass every day in their chapel, which was the hospital chapel. If we wanted to go, this was our choice. So I got to know them very well. I saw them praying. I saw them in their ministry. And I started talking to one sister and then another sister, learning how they lived. I saw them, how they interacted with each other. And this was how I really found what my call was. I knew that God was calling me, and I wanted to do this. But it never occurred to me that I could leave school and enter the community, which one of our older classmates in a senior class decided that she would do. My thought at that time was, she's so close to finishing, why is she leaving now? And this was something that I had learned at home. If you start something, you finish it. So I was going to finish it and finish school. And it was a 3-year diploma program. So I finished, I graduated, and then I decided my father had made a great sacrifice to send me to school. So it was my chance to pay back. So I thought, maybe this can wait, and I'm going to work for this year. I had already talked to my parents about my vocation call and that I really wanted to do what these sisters did. And so they were in agreement. My mother was sad. My father was very happy. And it was like realizing his own vocation as I responded to mine. And so I worked, and at the end of that year, I applied. Well, before I applied for entrance, and I left home at that time and started a very different life. I went to St. Louis, Missouri. So from New Mexico in the Southwest to St. Louis, Missouri was a long trek. I went on the train, and that was quite an adventure. I was traveling by myself, and I was going to start a new life. So I got there, and I met all these young women, and they were from different states, different areas. We were all together. I was the only Hispanic in my group, but it really didn't matter because for all of us, it was a new type of life that we were sharing. So we went through the various steps of formation, and each time we were asked, you must make known how you really feel. Is this what you want to do? And as we learned more about what it meant to be a daughter of charity, I knew that this is what God was calling me to do. And so I did it was almost 2 years in the beginning, and then we went into an educational part. And at that time, there was a thrust to have a college degree. I had a diploma, but I studied for another 2 years and I got a Bachelor of Nursing. So then I was ready to go out and to serve, and I longed to do what I had seen the sisters doing. So that was my first assignment in a hospital. And I was preparing, first of all, in very basic work as a staff nurse, as a head nurse, and then finally as a supervisor. And then I had another call, and that was to continue my education. And it seemed like too soon. It was 4 years since I had graduated from the other program. Now I was going to study for a master's. So it was a great opportunity. And my interest was in maternal child health. And what we were going to do, and this is what my provincial said, you're going to prepare to go to San Antonio, Texas, and we had a clinic there. We were going to have a birthing center, another sister and I. I thought this was very exciting. And so my program was a master's in maternal child health, but it was also nurse midwifery, so I was going to be a nurse midwife. And this was very exciting to me. Well, it turned out that plans were changed, and that was because the state of Texas did not approve nurse midwives. So we couldn't do that. But then I was offered something else, and they said, we need someone to teach nursing, someone who has a master's degree, to go to Ecuador. And this was a project that our community had taken up in conjunction with the University of St. Louis, and also with USA at the time. And we were going to help our own sisters, our Ecuadorian sisters, to be educated and then to start this program in the University of Ecuador. So this was also a very exciting time for me because I had dreamt of being a missionary, and here I was, so I thought I was too young to move on from hospital to study. That happened. Then I go to something that I had dreamt about going because I had seen sisters who were missionaries and who were leaving. And this was also another call that I was getting. So I spent 3 years in Ecuador until our Ecuadorian sisters were educated and could come back and relieve us. This was a temporary project of assistance in another country. Another sister and I also went out into the campo, into the rural area, and we provided health care for the people who were poor, very poor in that area. They were indigenous peoples and had no one and had no transportation to get into the city. So we would go out there, and every week we went out. We went out every Sunday. We also participated in the religious services. So our charism is to serve the poor, and this through education was one way, but also through this direct service was another way, which helped me to grow in my calling and also provide service for the people. So at the end of that time, because I had the experience of 3 years in a university, I was called back to the United States, and I had another few years at a university with nursing education. But I always wanted to go back to a missionary country. And It was a time when we were being asked from the United States to go out and to provide service to the people of other countries. And so I volunteered to go to Bolivia. So again, this was an area that I loved. And this experience was not so short-term. It was 15 years that I spent in Bolivia. And because I had the experience in nursing education, that's what I went into. But my prayer and my desire was that I would be able to practice the nurse midwifery that I couldn't do because I was in education. But it helped me with teaching, and I didn't know it, but I was preparing little nurse midwives in the nurses that we had in the School of Nursing. In both countries, many times these women, and then later in Bolivia we had men also, they were the first college graduates in their families. And it was with great pride that their families came to their graduation, and sometimes it was indigenous peoples and who came, these women who had these particular hats and particular dress from their region. Sometimes they didn't know Spanish and they had their own language. And so sometimes it was difficult to know, though I had learned a little bit of Quechua, but that was for only one area of Bolivia. The ones from the plains, the high plains, the mountains spoke other languages. The ones from the tropics also had other languages. So it was difficult, but their daughter or son always translated when I was talking with them. So I felt it wasn't what I had felt that would be the best thing to do, but it was helping these women and men to get an education and to be good professionals. And it was an opportunity to pass on our philosophy of care, our charism of serving those who are most poor. And this is what they did. They went to all different parts of Bolivia because ours was the only Catholic school of nursing in a Catholic university setting. And they were really wanted in the other areas of the country. So I thought to myself, well, what I could do with all of these students, if there are 100 students, it's 100 times more than what I could do personally. So it was a very satisfying time. Not all my time was spent in the School of Nursing, but about 2/3 of the time. And then the other part was in the tropics with very, very poor people in a small dermatological hospital, and where we had people with these terrible skin diseases, including Hansen's disease, which is leprosy. I learned so much being there about the poor, about their resilience, about their ability to suffer, about their acceptance of whatever God was sending them, because we did consider them the poorest of the poor. They had been, the people with Hansen's, with leprosy, had been isolated in a very small area that had a very bad name. No one was interested in them. And so one of our sisters who had been in Bolivia for a long time talked with the bishop and talked with different organizations to try to get a hospital that was comparable to what other people were getting, where they could be served with dignity and they could be helped to be rehabilitated. And so many of the people that had been in this colony could now go into society because they had been treated, and they could be part of society, and no one needed to fear them. The ones who had deformities were the people that had never been treated and had had the disease since they were very young. And so the ones who were being diagnosed when we were there and when with the doctors that we had did not show any signs. They looked like completely normal people. It was nothing to fear because it's transmitted by constant contact with a person who has it. So family members, it runs in families. It goes from one generation to another. They pass it down. And it's rarely seen in new families, although it can occur because someone in the family gets it, does not know it, and passes it on to children if it's an adult. But it was a very gratifying experience as well. And so then after that, I did return to the States after the 15 years there. And I decided that I had a lot of experience in nursing education and administration. I had never really practiced for very long what I had learned in the way of mothers and children and families. And so I did a little refresher course, and then since that time, in the past 21 years, I have worked as a nurse midwife in a clinic, very large clinic that we have here in El Paso, Centro San Vicente, named for our founder, and this is where I did practice nurse midwifery. Now that I'm older, I'm not able to follow that same schedule that is required and the volume of people that have to be seen. And so the last 3 years, I have worked in the diocesan office as the liaison for women religious. And this is a different type of work, but it is working with sisters and enabling them, making connections, having group meetings, having conferences for the sisters in continuing education. And I also do other ministries. Have a ministry in Juarez where a nurse and I started a program for women's health many years ago. It has now become a program that the people in that clinic do, so we don't do it anymore, but I do have contact with them. And I help them whenever I can. We also, the nurse and I, worked with another group of women in a very poor area, helped them to be promoters of health, and then helped them with their social ministry. So that I continue to do. And I've also worked with immigrants. I've been doing counseling at a detention center, counseling with women who are detained. In all of them, in all of these people, I see the face of God. And I find God in them. And I'm very happy to be able to be of service. So we never retire. We change ministries. We do something that's maybe less demanding. But I think the way to keep going, and this has has been something that I've tried to do for 55 years now as a daughter of charity, is to serve in whatever way that I can, whatever way that God has called me. And so I hope that you will listen to that call. God continues to call. And so that you can find where you can belong, where you can fit in, where you are in this plan of God, and where you can serve. This is what it's all about. It's not about ourselves. It's about finding God and finding God in those we serve. Well, if you feel that you've been called but you're afraid to respond, as I said, I was from a very small town, a little village, and I went halfway from here, or from this area, to Missouri, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And I think what helped me was to trust in God, that it was God who was calling me, and it was God who would care for me, and it would tell me where I really belonged. And that's what I always prayed, is this where I belong? When things seem strange, when things are different than what we expect, there's always surprises, and I think our God is a God of surprises, and I've had many surprises in my life. I never would have thought that I would have the experiences that I have had, but it's a matter of trusting God. If you believe that God is calling you, then God will lead you. God will guide you. That's what has happened in my life, and I always found God in whatever happened, whatever event, whatever experience. So don't be afraid. Trust God, and God will help you, even if it's walking on water.